A space station. Two people alone. A robot that should not think for itself. In 1980, a movie promised to scare audiences with all of this. But behind the camera, something darker was happening. A director was fired in secret. Scenes were cut and never shown again. A voice was erased and replaced. And one man connected to this film never lived to see it finish. This is the story Hollywood tried to bury. Hello, and welcome back to the channel where we dig up the buried secrets of classic cinema. If you love true stories about lost scenes, secret studio fights, and movies that were never truly finished the way their creators wanted, then hit that subscribe button, because today's story is one of the strangest in science fiction history. We are talking about Saturn III, a movie you may have heard of, a movie some people call a strange, forgotten flop, but very few people know the real story behind it. The truth is bigger, sadder, and much stranger than the movie itself. On the surface, Saturn III looks like a simple space thriller. Two scientists live alone on a research station near the planet Saturn. A stranger arrives. He brings with him a powerful robot. Slowly, things go wrong, very wrong. But the real mystery is not what happens on screen. The real mystery is what happened off-screen, long before the movie ever reached a theater. Why was the director suddenly replaced in the middle of filming? Why does one actor's voice not even belong to him in the final cut? What happened to the missing scenes that were shot, paid for, and then quietly erased? And why did the man who first dreamed up this story never get to see it become a movie? Stick with us, because we are about to open a case file that has been sitting closed for over 40 years. Let's go back to the beginning. In the late 1970s, science fiction was exploding. Star Wars had just changed the entire film industry. Alien was about to terrify audiences everywhere. Studios wanted their own dark, adult space thriller. And that is where our story begins. The idea for Saturn III came from a man named John Barry. Now, this is not the famous music composer. This John Barry was a production designer, an artist who built entire worlds for the camera. He had worked on huge films before, including Star Wars itself. He helped design its look and its feel. He understood space, he understood fear, and he wanted to direct his own film. John Barry created the concept for Saturn III. He imagined a small, isolated space station. He imagined loneliness. He imagined a robot that becomes dangerous. This was going to be his moment, his chance to step out from behind the design table and into the director's chair. The script itself was written by a celebrated novelist named Martin Amis. Amis was known for sharp, intelligent writing. Bringing him in showed just how seriously the studio was taking this project. This was not meant to be a cheap thrill. This was meant to be smart, tense, and unforgettable. The studio brought in major stars to lead the film. Kirk Douglas, already a Hollywood legend, would play Adam, one of the two scientists. Farrah Fawcett, one of the biggest names on television at the time, would play Alex. And playing the dangerous outsider Benson was the intense and unpredictable actor Harvey Keitel. On paper, everything looked perfect. A strong concept, a respected writer, famous stars, a first-time director with a powerful vision. But something was missing. Behind the scenes, cracks were already forming, and they would soon tear the entire production apart. Making a movie is never simple, but some productions are cursed from the start. Saturn III was one of them. John Barry, directing for the first time, had a very specific vision. He wanted the film to feel cold, slow, and deeply uncomfortable. He wanted the audience to feel trapped, just like the characters on that lonely space station. This kind of vision takes patience. It takes trust from the studio. It takes time. But the studio did not have patience. Reports from people involved in the production describe growing tension almost from day one. Filming was slow. Barry was still learning how to direct actors, how to manage a massive set, how to control a huge crew, all while also trying to protect his original artistic vision. The pressure grew heavier every week. Then came the moment that changed everything. Partway through filming, the studio made a shocking decision. They removed John Barry as director, the man who created the entire concept. The man whose imagination started this project was pushed aside on his own film. In his place, the studio brought in Stanley Donen, a respected and experienced director known for very different kinds of films, including classic musicals and comedies. Donen was skilled and professional, but he was not the person who dreamed up this dark, cold space story. He was brought in to finish someone else's vision, using someone else's blueprint. Imagine spending months building your dream, only to have someone else finish it for you, using your own materials, but their own eyes. That is exactly what happened to John Barry. And tragically, the story does not end there. Not long after being removed from his own film, John Barry passed away. He never got to see Saturn III finished. He never got to see his dream fully brought to life or fully taken away. To this day, film historians describe this as one of the saddest stories in science fiction filmmaking. A visionary artist who never got to finish his own vision. Now let's talk about the voice. If you watch Saturn III today, you will hear Harvey Keitel's character speak. But here is the strange part. That is not Harvey Keitel's real voice. During or after filming, the studio made the decision to dub over Keitel's dialogue using a different actor. Reports say the studio felt his natural New York accent did not fit the character, who was meant to sound more refined and unsettling. So his entire performance, every word, every line, was replaced using another actor's voice. Think about what that means for a moment. Harvey Keitel gave a full physical performance. His face, his body, his timing, all real. But the voice coming out of his mouth belongs to someone else entirely. It is like watching one person's body controlled by another person's soul. For an actor, this can feel like a piece of their performance being stolen. Voice carries emotion. Voice carries rhythm. When you remove an actor's real voice, you are not just changing sound. You are changing the entire character. Audiences at the time had no idea. They simply watched the film and accepted what they saw. But what they never saw and never heard was the real Harvey Keitel performance the way it was originally recorded. So now we arrive at the biggest mystery of all, the missing footage. Films rarely make it to theaters exactly the way they were filmed. Scenes get trimmed. Scenes get removed. Sometimes entire storylines disappear before audiences ever get a chance to see them. Saturn III is no exception. In fact, it may be one of the most heavily altered science fiction films of its era. When Stanley Donen took over the production, changes did not stop at just finishing the film. Sources close to the production describe additional reshoots, changes to pacing, and trims made to scenes that were considered too slow, too strange, or too uncomfortable for a mainstream 1980 audience. Some of the psychological tension that John Barry originally wanted, the slow, creeping dread of isolation, was softened. Scenes that once lingered longer on fear and loneliness were tightened. The final theatrical cut moves faster, but many longtime fans and historians argue that speed came at a cost. What was lost was mood. What was lost was atmosphere. What was lost was the deeply unsettling, almost art house feeling that John Barry had originally imagined. The truth was hidden for decades. Casual viewers simply saw a strange, sometimes clunky science fiction thriller. They had no idea they were watching a heavily reshaped version of someone else's original nightmare. Let's talk about why missing scenes actually matter. Not just as trivia, but as something that truly changes how a movie feels. Imagine two versions of the same story. In one version, the audience slowly learns to feel trapped alongside the characters. Silence stretches. Loneliness builds. Fear creeps in slowly, the way real fear often does. In the other version, That same story moves quickly from one shocking moment to the next. There is less time to sit with the characters, less time to feel their isolation, less time to understand why the robot's presence feels so wrong before things fall apart. That difference is not small. That difference can change a movie from a haunting psychological experience into a simple monster thriller. Film historians who study lost and altered versions of movies often point to this exact problem. When studios prioritize pace and marketability over mood and atmosphere, something meaningful can disappear, even if every actor, every location, and every special effect stays exactly the same. Saturn III, as originally imagined, may have been a slower, colder, more disturbing psychological experience. What audiences actually received in theaters was something faster, and for many critics at the time, something far less effective. Let's also talk about the robot, because the robot was never just a machine. It was the heart of the entire nightmare. In the story, a robot named Hector is brought onto the station by the outsider, Benson. Hector is meant to help with the hard, physical work. But slowly, Hector begins to change. He becomes obsessive. He becomes violent. He becomes something the humans on board can no longer control. Building Hector was not easy. The robot suit was heavy, difficult to move in, and physically demanding for the performer inside it. Behind the scenes, reports describe long, exhausting days simply trying to make the robot move in a way that felt threatening instead of clumsy. Every step, every turn of the head had to be planned carefully so the audience would believe this machine could actually kill. John Barry, as a production designer, understood machines and space stations better than almost anyone in Hollywood at the time. Hector was his creation. It reflected his very specific vision of what made technology frightening, not laser guns or explosions, but something closer, something that lived in your home and slowly turned against you. When the directing changed hands, some of that careful, patient buildup around Hector was affected too. Scenes that once allowed the robot's strangeness to grow slowly were tightened. The result on screen still works as a thriller, but some historians argue the original, slower version may have made Hector feel less like a movie monster and more like a real and quiet horror. Now let's talk about the human side of this story, because behind every technical decision, there were real people carrying real pressure. Kirk Douglas was already a major star by 1980, with decades of experience. Farrah Fawcett was coming off enormous fame from television, and this was one of her first major attempts at big-screen stardom. Harvey Keitel was known for intense, unpredictable performances, the kind of actor who could make a scene feel dangerous just by walking into it. Put these three very different personalities into one small, tense set, add a stressed production, a fired director, and a tight filming schedule, and you get exactly the kind of environment where creative decisions become emotional decisions too. Some reports from the era describe a set that felt tense, not just because of the story being filmed, but because of the real uncertainty surrounding who was actually in charge. Actors often take their emotional cues from the confidence of their director. When that confidence is interrupted, when a director is suddenly replaced mid-shoot, that uncertainty does not just disappear. It can quietly seep into performances, into pacing, into the entire feeling of a film. This is something audiences rarely think about when they watch a finished movie. They see confident actors, smooth editing, a complete story. They do not see the sleepless nights, the sudden meetings, the changed pages of script arriving the morning of a shoot. But something was missing from that finished product. Something that is hard to name exactly, but easy to feel. A gap between what could have been and what audiences actually received. Critics in 1980 were not kind to Saturn III. Many called it confusing. Some called it disappointing, especially given its talented cast and promising concept. Very few of them knew, at the time, just how much turmoil had shaped the film before it ever reached the screen. Reviews often focused on the strange tone of the film, part slow psychological drama, part violent monster thriller, never fully settling into one identity. Looking back now, that uneven feeling makes a lot more sense. A film that changes directors mid-production, changes voices in post-production, and adjusts its pacing to fit studio expectations will almost always feel a little uneven. It is not one single vision on screen. It is two visions, stitched together. Over the decades, however, something interesting happened. As more information slowly came out about the troubled production, film historians and cult movie fans began looking at Saturn III differently. Instead of just judging the finished film, they began asking a deeper question. What could this film have been? The movie slowly found a small but loyal group of fans, the kind of audience that gathers around forgotten films. Science fiction collectors, cult movie fans, and curious historians began trading stories, articles, and old interviews, trying to piece together the fuller picture of what happened during filming. Home video releases over the years kept the film alive, introducing it to new generations who had never even heard of its troubled history. That question is exactly why lost and altered versions of movies matter so much to film history. A finished movie is not always the full story. Sometimes the real story is hidden in what never made it to the screen. So where does that leave us today? Unlike some famous lost films, there has been no widely publicized full director's cut release of Saturn III restoring John Barry's original vision. Much of what we know about the changes comes from behind-the-scenes reports, interviews, and the memories of people who worked on the production, rather than from surviving deleted footage being shown to the public. This is part of what makes the story of Saturn III so haunting. Unlike movies where lost scenes were later found in a vault and lovingly restored, John Barry's original vision may exist today only in memory, in old production notes, and in the imagination of film historians trying to piece together what could have been. No dramatic rediscovery, no triumphant restoration screening, just questions and the quiet sadness of an artist who never got to finish his own dream. What audiences never saw was the full, uncompromised vision of a first-time director who understood fear, isolation, and cold, mechanical dread better than almost anyone working in production design at the time. What audiences never heard was Harvey Keitel's true, unaltered voice bringing his character fully to life. And what history nearly forgot was the name of the man who imagined this story in the first place, a man who helped shape the visual world of Star Wars, and who deserved the chance to finish telling his own dark, unsettling tale among the stars. Let's step back for a moment and think about why this story still matters today, decades later. Space station movies work because they play with a very simple human fear, the fear of being trapped somewhere with no way out, no neighbors, no help, just you, one or two other people, and whatever else might be lurking in the dark corners of the ship. John Barry designed the Saturn III station to feel exactly like this. Long, quiet hallways, cold lighting, machines that hum in the background like something breathing. Every detail was meant to make the audience feel small and far from home. That design still exists in the finished film. You can still feel traces of Barry's original vision in the way the station looks and sounds. The bones of his idea are there. But the pacing that surrounds those bones tells a slightly different story than the one he originally imagined. This is one of the strange truths about filmmaking. A movie can be visually beautiful, technically impressive, and still feel emotionally incomplete if the rhythm around it does not match the vision that built it. Saturn III is often cited by film historians as a clear example of this exact problem, a film where the pieces are strong, but the way those pieces were assembled tells two different creative voices at once. And that brings us back to the central mystery we opened with. Not a mystery about aliens or monsters or robots. A mystery about vision itself, about what happens when a story is taken out of the hands of the person who imagined it first. So today, Saturn III sits in a strange place in movie history. Not quite a forgotten failure. Not quite a hidden masterpiece. Somewhere in between, wrapped in mystery, changed hands, changed voices, and changed visions. It stands as a quiet reminder that the movie you watch on screen is not always the movie that was meant to exist. Sometimes the truest version of a film lives only in the space between what was filmed and what audiences were finally allowed to see. So here is our question for you. If John Barry had been allowed to finish Saturn III exactly as he imagined it, slower, colder, and more disturbing, do you think it could have become a true science fiction classic? Or do you think the studio was right to speed things up for audiences? Let us know in the comments below. We read every single one. And if you enjoyed uncovering this hidden piece of film history with us today, make sure you are subscribed, because there are many more buried secrets waiting to be found. Until next time, keep questioning what you see on screen, because sometimes the real story was never meant to be seen at all.